Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, rights campaigners say that the death toll from recent ethnic clashes in Ethiopia is more than twice as high as official figures. Amnesty International claims that at least 58 people were killed in attacks on minority communities over the weekend. Also, Liberia says it's lost track of the equivalent of around $100 million in freshly printed banknotes just after they arrived in the country's ports. We take a closer look with our correspondent. And in northern Mozambique, villagers say that the discovery of ruby mines in the area has left them worse off. The gems have attracted bullying and violence to residents of Nthuru. But first, there were mass arrests on Wednesday in Addis Ababa in response to days of fatal unrest in the Ethiopian capital. At least 5 people were shot dead by police on Monday during a demonstration calling on the government to do more about ethnic violence, which happened over the weekend, in which dozens were killed. Fighting initially broke out last weekend in the neighbourhood of Burayu. It's in the Oromia region. Witnesses claim that minority communities were being brutally targeted by the Oromo, the country's largest ethnic group.
The
government is saying, let's come together. But we're being driven apart because there's no rule of law.
When they tried to cut my granddaughter's breast, I took out mine and I begged them to cut mine instead. Then they stopped. But they took her father instead.
People from Dorze and Gurage ethnic groups were targeted, especially Dorze. Our neighbours say they live with us, but the other group says they have to leave.
Well, the Oromia police have been accused of taking their time in responding, having ignored calls for help. And on Tuesday, rights group Amnesty International said that the death toll from the ethnic clashes stood at least 58, far higher than the 23 victims given by the state. Tom Gardner tells us more about the discrepancy from Addis.
Firstly, with regards to the death of the protesters on Monday, the government admitted it happened, but was very quiet about the details. I spoke to eyewitnesses who disputed the police's version of events, which gives the impression of a cover-up of some kind. This has been a familiar pattern in Ethiopia in recent years. As for the many deaths resulting from ethnic violence over the weekend, I certainly think the government wants to play this down because it's terrible for the country's image as well as the image of Abiy Ahmed's new administration. He looks like he's not in control of events, and it makes the state look weak and fragile. Added to that, ethnic violence of this kind is politically incredibly sensitive at the moment. Oromo and other groups have been trading blame for the last few days, and I think as someone who wants to be seen as a national unifier, Abiy's reluctant to speak out too directly or robustly on the matter for fear of alienating certain segments of his support base. That said, he has spoken out today at his party congress in Oromia, and his deputy, the vice president of the region, has also made some strong statements on the subject of ethnic violence involving Oromos, much stronger than was the case in the past. So I think there are signs the government is starting to address this more seriously.
So tell us a bit more about the context of what sparked the unrest in the first place.
Well, who started the violence is unclear. Both sides have blamed the other, but broadly it relates to the arrival over the weekend of formerly exiled leaders of the Oromo Liberation Front and many thousands of their supporters, mainly young Oromo men in Addis Ababa for a big rally over the weekend. They brought with them the flag of the Oromo Liberation Front, which was put up all over the city, somewhat controversially in places. The rally itself was peaceful, but the real tensions between these groups and local Addis residents, accompanied by hate speech as well online. Things turned violent in places before the rally, and then really erupted the night after the rally in suburbs across the city.
So where do things stand at the moment?
Well, internet was shut down for 48 hours in order to tame online hate speech, but it came back on this morning, which is a sign that things are a bit calmer. There's been rumours of another big demonstration on its way, but nothing has materialised yet. As you said, security forces have been arresting hundreds of activists in raids, house-to-house raids across the city today. So that's an escalating government crackdown. But more generally, I mean, it's really poisoned, ethnic relations across the country, and particularly here in Addis. And I think Abiy's supporters are losing some faith in his leadership. So I think the impact might be felt for quite a while yet.
Tom Gardner there for us in Addis Ababa. Now, Liberia has said it's lost track of the equivalent of $100 million in freshly printed notes just after they arrived in the country's ports in containers and sacks. Our regional correspondent tells us more.
Somewhere along their journey from Liberia's ports and main airport to their final destination with the central bank, some 15 billion Liberian dollars in freshly printed banknotes simply went missing. That's equivalent to $100 million, a huge amount of money anywhere, but a particularly staggering sum in Liberia, one of the world's poorest countries. And for a sense of scale, if that had happened in Germany, it'd be the equivalent of $111 billion going missing. The government has only just gone public on this and the details are still scarce, but it appears that multiple currency shipments have gone missing between November last year and August this year. This covers a period of the change in government between the former president, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, and current president and former footballer, George Weah. And perhaps the most bizarre part of all of this is that the current administration denies any knowledge or to have any records of the former administration ever ordering this money from foreign mints. 15 people, including the former central bank governor and Charles Sirleaf, the former president's son, are now under travel bans as the authorities continue their investigations.
Uganda's banned any welcome rallies for Bobi Wine when he returns home from the US after he tweeted on Wednesday that he was on his way back. The Ugandan lawmaker and pop star left the country earlier this month for medical treatment for injuries that he says he received whilst being tortured by Ugandan security forces. Wine's real name is Robert Kyagulanyi, and he's an outspoken critic of President Yoweri Museveni and has a large young support base in Uganda. And wildlife trade monitoring researchers in South Africa say that the country's abalone population could collapse. A new report says that the once abundant large sea snail is at risk after an estimated 96 million were illegally harvested between 2000 and 2016. Only about a third taken from South African waters is legal. Poaching is driven by Chinese gangs. Most abalone heads to Hong Kong, where it's a sought-after delicacy. Now, poor South African communities are reportedly offered drugs to dive for the mollusks. Ecologists say the poaching levels are the highest seen in 2 decades and want stricter trade rules on South African abalone and for it to be listed as endangered. Now, 7 years ago, ruby deposits were found in the village of Nthoro in northern Mozambique. Since then, a mostly British firm has been making millions, but residents say that the mine is bringing them nothing but trouble. Nicola Chamat tells us more.
Nthoro is a poor village in northern Mozambique, yet it lies next to major ruby deposits that are mostly owned by British firm Gemfields. Between 2014 and 2017, the mine made more than €240 million. But villagers say some of their land was seized by the authorities to make way for the mine.
The company's security agents came to our village. They had a bulldozer and they destroyed our houses. They chased us away.
Before, life here was good. People had farms, they could grow crops and sell the products to get some money. But now, we are starving.
Earlier this year, 100 villagers filed a lawsuit against Gemfields in London. The British firm and local authorities said a plan to resettle residents was nearly finished.
The construction of houses for the villagers has been a bit delayed, but we are optimistic. We have a contract with the company and things are moving forwards.
But for now, residents say they were better off 7 years ago, before the discovery of the ruby deposits.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.